So I just want to say good morning to everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this important symposium. It's really an honor to be here, and I so enjoyed your talk, and I look forward to hearing everyone's talks today. In my presentation, I will discuss some of the National Gallery of Art's approaches to teaching and learning with young audiences. And I'm going to specifically focus my topic on one of our areas of emphasis, which is teaching critical thinking through arts. And so the question is, why does this matter and why now? Firstly, critical thinking, I think we can all agree, is a core intellectual competency, and it's widely recognized as a leading sort of 21st century skill. Currently, there's strong emphasis on critical thinking in the United States due to the wide adoption of the Common Core State Standards. Common Core State Standards are a set of curriculum standards in English and math that have been adopted by 41 of our 50 states and more than 10,000 school districts. And it really features critical thinking as sort of central to its curriculum. The development of critical thinking also is an important global concern. In order to achieve the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal number 4, which is to ensure inclusive, quality education for all and to promote opportunities for lifelong learning, and certainly critical thinking is a part of that as well. And finally, as the National Gallery of Arts, we have a mandate to serve the nation. And so centering a lot of our work around critical thinking has allowed us to have sort of broad impact across the country. So to support and guide our work, my colleagues and I have really looked into a variety of teaching methodologies and educational theorists, including the work of John Dewey, George Hine, Paulo Freire, and John Falk. However, our work has been most profoundly impacted by the research at Harvard University's Project Zero. And just if you're not familiar with Project Zero, it's a research institute in the Graduate School of Education there that investigates important questions about learning and the arts. And for more than a decade, we have adapted Project Zero ideas and frameworks that were originally designed for the classroom into the museum setting. And we've seen children as well as adults respond powerfully in terms of their own learning and experiences with art. Now, Project Zero's work has many facets. There's many different sort of research investigations. However, today, I'm going to really focus on two facets that I think have been critically important to us, and those are artful thinking and cultures of thinking. And these frameworks, which I'll describe in more detail shortly, really amplify and underscore what we value about teaching and learning in the museum. And so what I want to talk about just for briefly is what do we value? What are some of our sort of core values at the museum? And so at the gallery, we hope that our visitors, both children and adults, will slow down. The average art museum visitor looks at a work of art for about 7 seconds. And we believe that works of art are complex, that they take time to get to know. So we invite visitors to step outside of their busy, fast-paced digital lives and be present with us in the museum. We invite our learners to look carefully and to go beyond those first glance assessments. And we know that the more they look, the more they'll see, and the more interesting and complex a work of art can become. We prompt our learners to think deeply, to develop reasoned interpretations, ask questions, make connections to their lives, history, and the world, and to process new ideas and information. And finally, during programs and visits, we hope that our learners have rich conversations. We think about how we can leverage the power of the group and the social aspects of learning to extend and enhance our visitors' thinking. These values inform and shape our programs for learners of all ages, and we continue to think about how we can better achieve these aims. But now back to the Project Zero frameworks. Designed as a model for arts integration, Artful thinking helps learners develop thinking dispositions that support thoughtful learning in the arts and in life. The Artful thinking framework takes the image of the artist's palette as its central metaphor. Typically, a palette's made up of a small number of colors that can be mixed in sort of limitless combinations. The Artful thinking palette is comprised of sort of 6 basic forms of intellectual behavior that can invigorate the exploration of works of art and other complex ideas. And so, as you notice on the Artful thinking palette, we have questioning, investigating, comparing and connecting, exploring viewpoints, observing and describing, finding complexity, and reasoning. And these 6 forms of thinking actually have been found by researchers to be readily accessed when exploring works of art. These are things we naturally do when we engage with works of art. And in addition, I think these ways of thinking are important because we know that they lead to the development of understanding. So it's in crucial types of intellectual behaviors that lead to learning and understanding. So placing emphasis on the kinds of thinking we want our children to grapple with shapes the way we plan, deliver, and evaluate our programming. And this shift prioritizes, or this is a shift from prioritizing content knowledge to fostering ways of thinking. It's also a shift from a more passive experience to a more active one. Now, like Artful thinking, cultures of thinking centralizes the role of thinking in learning. And the concept of a culture of thinking was developed by Ron Richart. He's a principal investigator at Project Zero. And Richart tells us that a culture of thinking is a place in which a group's collective as well as individual thinking is valued, visible, and actively promoted as part of the ongoing experience of the group. And this culture can be created in any learning setting, whether it's a school tour or a family program or a symposium for adults. So why is this important? Museum research suggests that more than 70% of all museum visitors come to us in groups. And of course, in our programs, we're also forming groups. So thinking about how people learn in groups and how we can improve the group learning experience is a crucial endeavor. In addition to discussing group learning, Richart and his colleague David Perkins tells us that learning is a consequence of good thinking. In other words, we need to actively and meaningfully think through a concept or area of content in order to understand it. So, how can we create experiences in our programs that facilitate this kind of active thinking that leads to understanding? Richart has identified 8 forces that shape group culture and that require our attention in order to create a productive context for thinking and learning. And you can see them pictured here on the screen. We've got the 8 cultural forces. And so I just want to point out a few of these cultural forces just as examples. You can see them pictured, and it starts with, how do we use time? How do we set expectations? How do we orchestrate interactions or model thinking? What steps do we take to set up the environment in a way that is effective for teaching and learning? And I think you'll see that we're also looking at things like language. What types of language are we using that really sets up this situation where thinking and learning can be promoted? So I'd like to focus on one of these cultural forces, and I'm going to focus on the cultural force of routines. And Richard tells us about routines. He says, quote, "By having a set of core questions or a simple structure to guide looking, museum educators establish a pattern of interacting with the collection that visitors can use throughout their visits and, more importantly, carry with them into future learning situations." And isn't that something that we hope will happen? That visitors will not only come into our museum, connect with our collections, but actually leave with some tools that they can use to look at works of art wherever they are. So, artful thinking and cultures of thinking are closely aligned. And they share some core strategies and approaches to teaching called thinking routines. Now, thinking routines are short, structured sets of open-ended questions that are designed to engage learners with complex objects and ideas, like works of art. And for example, one of the most popular routines is called See, Think, Wonder. And it asks 3 seemingly simple questions. What do you see? What do you think about what you see? And what do you wonder? And if you're new to thinking routines, this routine can be a great place to start because see, think, and wonder are things that learners already know how to do at some level. So it's a very sort of accessible set of questions. The questions also cover areas of thinking that are crucial to many different disciplines. Starting with what do you see, and then sort of lingering a bit with this question, creates the space for learners to develop the capacity for careful observation. The second step asks learners to reason, building on their observations. And the third step ends the routine with a question, so that as learners sketch a path of inquiry, they see the process of inquiry as one that can continue, and that the end game isn't always just that one right answer. Rich topics and complex objects invite us to dig in and to investigate and explore again and again. Routines like See, Think, Wonder really level the playing field so that each child's thinking is valued as an important contribution to the conversation, leading to new understandings about art, artists, and the museum. And these strategies also empower children to develop their own profound ideas, building their confidence and abilities with critical thinking in any learning setting. And really, the best way to learn about thinking routines is to try one. But in the case of our symposium today, what I'd like to do is show you a short video clip from the National Gallery's new massive open online course called Teaching Critical Thinking with Art. And in this 3-minute clip, you'll see a group of children. They're 4th graders, so they're about 9 or 10 years old. And they're working with a museum educator to explore a painting by the artist Aaron Douglas. And the children will first use a thinking routine called What Makes You Say That? And to unpack what they see and to use their reasoning abilities to interpret what might be going on. So let's take a look at this snippet of their conversation. And as you watch, I'd like to ask you to pay particular attention to what you notice about the students' thinking and sort of intellectual behaviors. Because we're going to have an opportunity to talk with our neighbor about this, and then we're going to have some sharing back with the whole group. So it's just a short clip, but see what you can pick up from it, what you're going to take away. Could you turn up the sound, please, on the video?
See, my triangles are swaying. These students are brave and open, and they're in it to win it. I am serious about the art and the history, but it's also fun. You know, it's fun. You can't make people love art. So I'm always amazed and humbled and surprised at how willing they are to join me on a journey. Welcome to the National Gallery of Art. I'm so glad you're here today because today we are going to learn about this wonderful painting by the artist Aaron Douglas. I want you to take a look at this work of art. And with your shoulder buddy, I want you to turn and share, what do you think is going on in this work of art?
I think that the big picture, there's like an angel. I see that the man is blowing a trumpet and he's holding a key in his hand and he's doing a pose.
Okay, guys, I've heard some wonderful ideas bouncing around. Let's come together. Louis.
I think that the dude, the big guy, he's freeing all the slaves, and it was during slavery time, and I think they're trying to escape.
What do you see that makes you say they're slaves?
How he painted them, how they're like their body movement and stuff. I think they might be looking like that person right to the right of him. Looks like he's looking for hope.
I think that the person with the trumpet in the hands, I think that he's like, the key is for like to unlock the door to heaven, so most of the people can go to heaven.
So why did you just say that this person has the key to heaven? What made you say that?
Because that person looks like he's an angel, because like behind him it looks like wings, and he's probably like trying to free all the slaves or people that are trying their best to go to heaven. I think that the man that's holding the key, I think that's the key to open the doors so they can get out of slavery.
What do you see that makes you think it's a key that's going to get them out of slavery?
I think that there's like doors and like wood doors, and they need a key to get out, and he has a key.
Since he has the key, sometimes slaves have chains, so maybe he unlocked it and set them free.
I agree with Fatima that I think the person on the right who's at the sunlight, I think he's praising the Lord because it looks like he's looking up and he's bending down.
So the posture, the body language.
All right, so what I'd like to invite us to do now is to turn to someone sitting next to you. If you don't know them, please introduce yourself. And you're gonna have 2 minutes to talk about what you noticed about the students' thinking and learning in this video. And after 2 minutes, I hope a few of you will be willing to share some of your insights and observations with the whole group. So, talk. All right, let's come on back together. And I'd love to hear if a few people would be willing to share, and I may need some help with translation here, I don't know. What are some of the things you noticed about the students' thinking and learning in that video? If someone could just raise their hands. Don't be shy. Yes. There isn't a mic, I don't think so, if you just want to shout it out. Oh, thank you. Wonderful.
그러니까 저는 아이들이 저런 식의 포스처를 보면서 해석하는 것이 미국의 그런 slavery, 그러니까 노예제도에 대한 사회 전반적인 인식과 그리고 기독교적인 문화가 깔려 있어서 저렇게 비슷비슷한 생각을 했다고 생각하고요. 그리고 제 파트너분은 저렇게 발표를 하다 보면 한쪽으로 그냥 너무 비슷하게 의견이 쏠릴 수 있다는 위험이 있지 않나 하고 말씀하셨어요.
Thank you. Would someone share what you just said?
So I just thought, just can I say it?
Yeah, sure, go for it.
Okay. So I just thought that when American people are really familiar with the concept of slavery, and America is pretty much Christianity is, I mean, a lot of people are Christian, so I thought that that cultural base has drawn the children to make the like similar thinking. And also my partner said that she thought that if the children are led to just say it out loud in a group, that kind of situation, she is kind of worried about like some other like shy children might have like other thinking, but you know they're afraid to talk different thinking. So like. Yeah.
Sure, thank you. I think you raised two really interesting points. The first one, you noticed that the children were connecting to things they already knew about, right? So they were connecting to the story of slavery, and they were connecting to religious content, which they be familiar with as a part of sort of their lives. And some children may have that background, and other children may not, but they were definitely connecting to prior knowledge. And then the other comment really was noticing that the children were invited to speak up in the group. And one of the things that we try to do, and we notice it, is that sometimes there's think, pair, share, right? There's students are coming together in a small group, and then we have whole group. And sometimes students are writing down their own personal reflections. So each person gets to share their ideas in a way that's comfortable for them. They might be more comfortable just talking to their neighbor. They may not want to speak out for the whole group, and that's fine too. The idea is that they're heard. They don't have to be heard by me. They just need to be heard. And so that's why we try to mix up the different kinds of interactions. But thank you. Other observations or comments? And now that I have my translation, I'll do a lot better. Yes, there's someone over here in the blue. Thank you.
First of all, it was really surprised that to see the children, they talk about the description of the art with their imagination. I mean, they are not saying about what they see. They are not just to describe what they see in the art picture, but they try to explain with their imagination. Also, I think the background of their culture and their education. So it was really surprised. And what you said, to do the critical thinking, it is really necessary to start with the see and think and wonder. But without all the processes, they just to do that. I mean, without all the, how can I say, the follow-up questions, they just start. So it was really a surprise for me.
Yeah, so this particular routine that we use, called What Makes You Say That, invited the students to sort of notice things in the painting, but then to make interpretations based on what they saw. And so they had to support it with evidence from the work of art. So he said, I think that, that has to do with slavery because I see chains. Or I think that's an angel because I see the wings. Or he has a trumpet and he's playing music. So they're making assertions based on things they see in the work of art. But it's exactly, they're able to share sort of what they think is true or what they're noticing. And so they're just building that capacity. It's not about getting the right answer, for sure. Other things? Any other comments? All right. Thank you all for having a conversation with each other and just taking a moment to sort of analyze sort of what was going on in that very brief video clip. And I think in addition to looking carefully and sort of developing reasoned interpretations using evidence they could see in the painting, they connected to prior knowledge about slavery and history. And I think one of my favorite moments in that video is when the young man, it's sort of towards the end of the clip, and he says, well, I want to agree with Fatima here. And what I love about that is that he's listening to what his fellow classmates are saying. He's connecting his ideas to hers, and they're building a conversation around that work of art, really sort of listening to what each other sees and thinks, and then using that to inform their own thinking. And I think that's definitely one of the goals of these sort of routines and these teaching strategies. So I sort of love it when it happens in that moment. So the thinking routine that was used to explore this painting was called What Makes You Say That? And as we said, it invites learners to respond to two questions. And the first question is, what might be going on in this painting? And the other is followed by, what do you see that makes you say that? And we heard Avis, the educator, sort of put both of those questions out there, maybe in her own words, but put both of those questions out there. And the routine with its open-ended questions really kind of slows us down by inviting us to look carefully and describe what we see or know, to consider multiple possibilities of what's happening, and to begin to interpret and make meaning of the image. It promotes evidence-based reasoning, and because it invites us to share our interpretations aloud, it encourages us to consider alternatives and multiple perspectives. Now, what makes you say that is one of many, many different thinking routines that have been developed by Project Zero. And you can see here in another version of the Artful Thinking palette that what makes you say that is sort of up here under the sort of reasoning heading. And See, Think, Wonder we can see here under the questioning and investigating heading. But what we noticed was that more than just reasoning happened with what makes you say that, and sort of more than just questioning happens when you use See, Think, Wonder. But these are the sort of the focus of these particular routines. And as you can see, there are many, many different thinking routines, and this is just a few that exist. Some of the routines ask you to synthesize big ideas or get to the heart of things. Other routines might ask you to consider multiple perspectives or to dig more deeply into your own thinking about something. However, regardless of the routine that you choose, there are some core characteristics of thinking routines that I think give them their power. And so I wanted to just say a few words about that. For example, all thinking routines are thinking-centric. They support and structure key thinking moves that can lead to understanding. They encourage us to use the language of thinking, to name it, and to bring awareness and attention to the value of thinking for the learner and the group. I think the second thing that's, for me, most important about the thinking routines is that they are learner-centered. They involve uncovering the learner's own thoughts and ideas as a starting point for learning and getting the learner personally involved. And it's really wonderful to have the students or the learners share their thoughts and ideas before we begin to deliver a lot of expert content. It doesn't mean that we don't do it. It just means that we really want to start with where the learners are. Most importantly, the routines have a few steps, so they're easy to remember and easy to keep in mind. Although it doesn't mean that they're simplistic, because we can structure an entire program around a routine like See, Think, Wonder and spend an hour, 20 minutes with See, and 15 minutes with Think, and another 20 or 30 minutes with Wonder. Doesn't mean that they're simplistic in that way, but it just means that they're easy to remember. They are flexible. They can be applied across a wide variety of contexts, across all different content areas, and they can be used to structure individual, small group, and whole group learning. And the questions or directives of the routine are open-ended. I mean, they are truly open-ended, seeking a broad range of possible responses and validating students' thinking. So it really creates a kind of safe environment for sharing. So hopefully students will feel empowered to share their ideas with one another. The routines are structured to scaffold thinking. Each progressive step in the routine pushes thinking to a higher level, to deeper and more nuanced thinking. For example, the What Makes You Say That routine starts out by asking you to make a claim or to set a hypothesis, and then with the next question, asks you to justify your ideas. Routines help make thinking visible, and whenever learners speak, write, or draw their ideas, their thinking deepens. And lastly, the routines can become more than a tool or a one-off strategy. They can become a pattern of behavior. Thus, they're called routines. Even on a 75-minute school tour, we've noticed that if we start each stop with slowing down, looking carefully, and describing what you see, by the third stop, students are slowing themselves down and beginning to describe what they see unprompted. So I think that students can actually pick up on these patterns of behavior. At the gallery, the routines have become important structures for guiding conversations around works of art. And the routines we found are great tools at getting audiences of all ages to look carefully, to raise questions and puzzles, and to make interpretations based on evidence. And what is wonderful about the thinking routines is that they support both individual and group learning, giving each member of the learning group an opportunity to develop their own thoughts and ideas about a work of art, as well as structuring a conversation to promote dialogue amongst a group of learners. Across the spectrum of our programming for children and the adults in their lives, these Project Zero ideas have anchored our work in robust, research-based practices that encourage participants to linger in learning, to give curiosity free rein, and to build new or expanded understandings. Of course, our emphasis on critical thinking does not exist in isolation, and in conjunction with critical thinking, we also provide experiences that are multimodal, employing art making, sketching, creative writing, movement, and sound. They are multisensory, asking learners to see with more than just their eyes. They're process-oriented versus product-focused, so that learners are experimenting and iterating with ideas and with materials. They are inclusive of content to the extent that it pushes thinking forward, and information is not seen as an end in itself. They are fun and playful. This should not feel like school. And they combine something familiar, so there's a comfortable entry point for learning, with something extraordinary to inspire awe and wonder. In fact, I think these approaches inherently ask learners to employ their higher order thinking abilities, so that each experience feels cohesive, rich, and engaging. For example, sketching can be a powerful tool to slow us down and encourage careful observation. Experiencing texture, whether real or imagined, asks us to observe and perhaps to connect with prior experience. And experimenting invites us to reason and wonder, just to mention a few examples. Now I'd like to bring us back to the children in our video. As you will recall, they unpacked and analyzed the work of art using What Makes You Say That? And then after the part of the program that we saw, the students spent some time looking at the work of art and tried to find various math concepts. They talked about angles and lines and shapes. Then they were introduced to some poetry that actually inspired the painting and made connections between the text and the image. And then finally, what I'd like us to watch is they're going to combine all that they've learned in a kinesthetic fashion. So let's take a look.
The absolute unique American music out of the African American tradition is jazz. Who's heard of jazz? Yes, this is Duke Ellington. See if you can find that rhythm here. How does that music make you want to move your body? You're Aaron Douglas, you're painting, you're in New York. I see swaying. We're going to be inspired like Aaron Douglas was and listen to some jazz. Stand up. Find your bubble. Bubble. Find the line that you're going to pose as, the angle or the shape. Okay, and 3, 2, 1, pose. Hold it. And when this music began, you're just going to be these beautiful lines, angles, and shapes in the painting, and let that music move you. Here we go. I see my triangles are swaying. Activate your angle. I'm a right angle. And now I'm a straight angle. And freeze.
All right. Of course, critical thinking is serious business, but we also believe in the adage attributed to Loris Malaguzzi, founder of the Reggio Emilia School in Philosophy, do nothing without joy. I want to thank you all so much, and I just want to share a few resources with you that if you are interested in exploring any of these ideas further, Project Zero has a wonderful, rich website. There's Artful Thinking and Visible Thinking if you want to find more information or try out some of the thinking routines. And I can't recommend this book highly enough. It's called Making Thinking Visible by Ron Richart, Mark Church, and Karen Morrison. It really explores the idea of thinking dispositions, of thinking routines, and then there's a lot of pictures of practice, because I think one of the best ways to sort of learn about these ideas is to see sort of descriptions of how other people are using them, both in museums and in classrooms, and across different grade levels and different subject areas. I also wanted to share just a few things that the National Gallery is producing that may be of interest to some. First of all, the video that we watched is from our new massive open online course called Teaching Critical Thinking Through Art. It's available for free on the edX platform, and basically it looks at some of the thinking dispositions that we saw on the Artful Thinking palette, and it provides instruction and videos of educators leading those routines in the classroom and in the museum with learners of all ages and all different types of schools and different kinds of kids, as well as some adults, some teachers. And I learned that we have over 8,000 people currently taking this course right now, and 50 of those people are from Korea. So I don't know if any of you are in the room today, but so if anybody's interested in that, I actually have some postcards about it as well. And then finally, I just want to share that we have a lot of resources online for educators, and many of them are looking at our collection through the lens of critical thinking, but also through the lens of other areas of emphasis, such as social justice and empathy and perspective taking and other areas that we're focusing on in education at the National Gallery. And I just want to draw your attention to one resource in particular called Uncovering America. And although it looks at sort of American history through works of art and through sort of various movements and sort of big questions like what does it mean to be American, that may not be of particular interest to you necessarily, but I think it's a model of the resource that invites us to think about these big sort of gnarly questions that are a part of our culture and that are a part of our history, and how works of art can be a wonderful place to spark conversation around those topics, and where we've provided these resources for teachers so they can have their conversations with their students. And we find that art is such a nice sort of level playing field, sometimes a neutral space for talking about issues that may be difficult or contentious, and so I think that resource has provided a nice model for that. And with that, I just want to say thank you so much, and I really appreciate your participation and your kind attention, and I'd be happy to take any questions. Thank you.